Hi, Af. Thank you for joining with me today.
Pleasure.
It's really great to have you here from GTA India. I know that you've been involved with Global Tech Advocates and Tech London Advocates for a long, long time, and it's really great to be able to see and hear the stories of what you've been able to tell everyone who's listening about how GTA made it work for yourself in your business and also in your personal life, and how you've actually made everything combine. So I'd love for you to just be able to introduce yourself, tell us what your role is, and what your key objectives are in what you do in tech.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. A real and fantastic opportunity. Well, listen, let me tell you about myself. So I am the CEO and founder of an organization called REN, which is a super disruptive generative AI company in the sustainability space. And I also run a nonprofit called Diversity Economics Institute, where we're trying to build the economic case for diversity, which is terribly important in the world right now. I run a podcast called Straight Talk that I've been running for the last 4 years, and it's important I state that because Russ Shaw, who's founded GTA, was one of my guests back in 2020. I'm a big fan of Global Tech Advocates, and the reason is because for the last 13 or so years, the first time I met Russ at an event that I was putting together for a charity of mine called Wow Talks back in the day, where he was a speaker, was a moment that was serendipitous because he spoke about this mission that he was on to build communities and get people to come together under the auspices of technology championing, technology pioneering, technology promotion. And he requested I join this community. And it was a concept more than anything at that point. I think he was trying to build a group of people who are like-minded. And just then, being the entrepreneurial self that I am, I suggested that, or I asked, in fact, is there a global play here in the sense that is technology only about London? Surely it's about other big cities around the world, like Bengaluru or Bangalore, as we called it back then. And he said, yeah, absolutely. Great minds think alike. What should we do? Do you want to do something with this? And that gave birth to what we called Tech India Advocates. And we are now 13 years down the line. It's a community of over 4,000 entrepreneurs, investors, government leaders, and so on. And, GTA has been this sort of, I would almost say a virtual family of sorts, where it was small. It was a small community many years ago, over a decade ago, and now it's 30,000 plus. And I found that with my last startup that I sold a couple of years ago, there was a time when I needed to access investors, and raising money from venture capital is super hard, no matter where you are in the world. And I recall reaching out to Russ, and not only did he open up a war chest of really cool names that I went to prospect and so on, but he also joined my advisory board in my last startup. And this is the power of the volunteer-led, technology-focused, that's your sort of objective and goal network. And it's extraordinary because I've been part of numerous networks and, in fact, led a few myself. And this is the first time where you don't have to pay any money, which it sounds like a bit of a crazy proposition, because you think, well, how do you actually fund this? And it does get funded, of course, successfully. But I think the beauty of taking away that commercial lead gen type intent, which of course people start to detest after a while, it becomes so salesy, is that you end up talking about things more than just doing business. You move into your personal life as well. People talk about their personal challenges. Just when recessions were happening many years ago, or leadership has changed in one part of the world and as affecting another part of the world, like the tariffs or the new government, tax regulations, you're able to talk about people's jobs and whether someone needs to shift jobs. And, you actually find jobs in this network as well. I know of many people who've recruited out of this network. So, I mean, the benefits are immense, really, and it's hard to really quantify it without telling you more and more stories. But I'll pause then and ask you to ask me some more questions.
Well, you've already gone into the next question that I wanted to ask. So thank you, Afa. I mean, my key one is to bring out one or two examples where you feel the community has really helped you and benefited you personally as well as your business, and help it grow, because ultimately that's what our mission is, to be accessible and inclusive and help for anyone within the tech ecosystem who wants to join it or navigate within it, to be able to move seamlessly and navigate through that and help each other grow. So I'd love to be able to draw out a couple of examples from you, given that you've had so many years in the community, of what you feel stands out there as being really great stories and examples.
Yeah, so last year we held, or 2 years ago, in fact, now we put together this delegation out to India. There's about 40 of us who joined the delegation. And, you know, one might think, well, it's a delegation and there's so many delegations happening every year. What's the big deal, really? Well, I'll tell you what the big deal was. Well, you know, a cluster of us ended up in Bangalore to experience the technology innovations of Bangalore. And a typical delegation would be well planned, which this was, of course. And you'd meet different institutions and different organizations, and you'd learn a little bit about the city or the country, and walk away and think, well, that was fantastic. But we decided to take it to a whole new level. We decided to bring part of India to the team that was to do with the diversity of India, the brilliance of the fact that it's a democracy where most people speak English, which is quite unusual for, you know, I guess now probably the second largest country on the planet, just after China. And we decided to look at innovations that were grassroots, so not just the typical stuff, which was AI and deep tech, semiconductor, and so on. We went into a tier two location called Hubli, which was near Bangalore, and it was quite an unusual and strange sort of experience that my co-founder Ani and I set up for the delegation, because it was quite emotive. We ended up at this place where it was almost like a large community of young people from troubled backgrounds, many of them from disadvantaged backgrounds, who were paid for, funded, looked after, actually living in this campus, part of different initiatives and ventures, and building their own startups. And the big takeaway was the delegation that came along experienced agri-tech, the innovation in agriculture at a level that we cannot see and experience in the Western world. You know, right the way from basic robots made for a fraction of the price, like a 10 cents on a dollar, or 10p on a pound, to seed germination technology, to even geospatial technology, under the banner of affordable excellence, right, which is what India is all about. You know, doing things faster in this concept of jugaad. Jugaad means frugal innovation, in other words, and that was one huge part of the experience that really moved us. And alongside that, I think I would say, talking about personal relationships and why this was such an extraordinary delegation, and we're doing another one, by the way, so this is what makes it special. There were people from different backgrounds on the delegation, you know, business owners, investors, entrepreneurs, speakers, authors, and so on and so forth. None of them, and many of them had been to India before, had experienced this version of India before. We built a personal rapport because of the emotion that came from looking at these young people who are innovating and creating things that are just extraordinary with very, very little money, little resources, and even scarce resources. And it allowed us to create this camaraderie and connection that you will probably speak to anyone who was on that delegation will tell you to this day that it was the most magical delegation they've ever been on. And we had a couple of diplomats on that delegation too, and they'll vouch for this. And I think that's the beauty of GTA. We do things very differently, and we do it based on personal relationships, not just on a business model or a venture model.
So yeah, this is the stories that I hear about in terms of how powerful that trip was. So that's why I'd love to know what was the outcome of it, like where, and what's another story that you could tell us, because I know you've done so many different things. So yeah, one is like, okay, the so what in it, I suppose, because it's so important that you actually build awareness and showcase. There is the other element of how we actually do help those businesses grow as well, and help founders and join people up, like you say. And then secondly, if there are any other stories, because I know, you know, even the story of when you start at GTA, the India Advocates, there's also a story there on how you actually managed to create it as well. So just wanted to
Yeah.
see if you could share those two things.
Sure. Yeah. Let me start with the last first, which was quite nostalgic. I would say back in 2013, 14, it was where I invited Russ and a few other people. It was a very small cohort, in fact, back then, to India. And you have to understand the context here. Like India was at that point emerging as a startup economy. It was sort of getting its ducks in a row and trying to figure out what does venture capital investment really look like, in early stage and then, of course, late stage. And angels were just sort of emerging through different clubs. They had a whole bunch of different angel clubs that were being formed, and people with money were joining these clubs and trying to figure out which technologies to back and so on. And just at that sort of early stage, we took out a mini delegation to Bangalore again at that point. I remember speaking to people about the United Kingdom and how it was a great place. We had this incredible ecosystem of fintechs back then, and a fast growing startup economy, and quite a mature biotech, fintech, and even deep tech, I would say, pedigree, especially in terms of the academia. Cambridge was active then, and some of the other universities. So the talk track and the proposition was really attractive for the folks in India. I remember we took out this group of us, and we were trying to find a venue. It was really hard at that point because we didn't have a lot of money to spend. This is volunteer led, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be very creative. And I reached out to this organization, and they happened to have this huge building. And they said, "This is great. We've always had aspirations to do something with London in particular and with the UK. Why don't you come over?" So we turned up. It was probably, I don't know, 7, 10 of us, Russ, myself, and a few others out there. And we didn't actually know what to expect, and we ended up at this place. We thought, gosh, I mean, are there going to be people? How many people will turn up? Will it be successful? Will it not be? And to our surprise, there were about 250 people who turned up. It's absolutely crazy. And the place was packed. There were people standing around the corners, sides, outside, wanting to come inside. It was jam packed. And in India, you will see that, in India, we have a big population there, about now 1.4 billion. So you can never, ever have an empty hall. And I think we realized that, right? So, and we did multiple events. We did one, and then we thought on the fly, we'll do another one. Because Ross was out for a few days. I was there for a few days too. So we actually did 2 or 3 events back to back. And the most extraordinary thing about India is that, things aren't always planned or pre-planned. So we planned one event, we just about got it. And then we had 2 more events right after, which got developed on the spot and got booked on the spot and location found on the spot because people were inspired by the first event we did. The outcome was, it was the birth of our community then for Tech India Advocates. And I think we signed up nearly 1,000 people to join the community to basically learn more about what it means to do business with the UK and vice versa. And I would dare to say we probably did, such a brilliant job that the government agencies from the UK who were attending too, we were collaborating, were astounded at the fact that a non-entity, a zero brand organization came in, and all of these people sort of latched onto us. And those let me tell you, like a lot of the people who signed up back then, some of them are unicorns now. In fact,
Wow, really?
Flipkart, some of the founders of Flipkart, which is a retailer, in fact, challenges Amazon in India. The founders joined our community there. Many, many other unicorn stories, or early stage stories that are now unicorn, poster child companies were part of our community back then. So yeah, that was the start of the journey. And I'd say we were early first movers in that regard because we were focused solely on tech as opposed to other business councils that are focused on all types of business. So kudos to us.
That's an excellent story. So did you invest in any of them? That's the question, right?
Yeah, well, actually, we there was some cross-pollination back then because there were some really cool individuals who were trying to build companies. I do know of some stories, people who actually migrated to the UK and they wanted to launch their company. Some worked, I think 1 or 2 came in and the startups are still there and doing well. And a lot of the others actually switched to jobs. So they came over. And if the startup didn't work out, they ended up working for, a leading or a high growth technology company. So I think the net game for both countries was incredible. A migration for us, high skilled talent for the UK, and for India, I guess it was sending someone into the UK to learn, to grow, to demonstrate the excellence of technology skills. Born in India, prospering in the UK. And some people have gone back actually, after many years of doing really well here, gone back, built their own companies. So this is about, relationships. This is about giving back first and asking for something later.
Definitely. So you basically have answered the next question, which is maybe, unless you can add any more to this, which is what do you think differentiates Global Tech Advocates and Tech London Advocates compared to other communities that you're clearly involved in and networks you're involved in?
Yeah, and I think I alluded to this earlier on, which is the non-transactional sort of nature of this community. You don't tend to find communities that are built, especially business-led communities, in this case technology, that stay the course for a long while. This is over a decade, 13 or 14 years now. And why has it stayed the course? Because people who've come into the community, who invest their time in the community, it could be someone like myself, who's built out a working group and a collective. It could be someone who, regularly attends all of these various events that different groups put together because they have an interest in a topic or an interest in a geography or whatever it may be. And I think it's this sort of sense of freedom and sense of ease that comes from talking to people in the community who don't necessarily always have an ulterior motive, but are there just to talk, to learn, curious,
Yes.
understanding, and empathetic. And I think that's the biggest advantage. And I have to tell you that it is very difficult to build such models because most of the models out there are, pay to play. There's some form of payment for a membership, which is fine. And I think preserving the sanctity of the volunteer model, or the model that is about giving rather than figuring out a transaction from day one. You do this and I'll do that, and then let's shake hands on it. I think that is pretty special, especially in an AI-driven world, in an era where things are being sort of removed at a human level. We need to now revisit and create some sort of a renaissance when it comes to human contact. So I think, funnily enough, timing is everything. I think Global Tech Advocates could be that non-tech based, as in it's promoting tech, but it's not a tech online LinkedIn community where everyone just exchanges a few messages and the rest is forgotten. It is about that personal relationship, like I spoke about earlier.
Yeah, so that's really great example, personal relationships, which is probably the key thing that we would want to be able to pass on to anyone who wants to join, right? It is all about personal relationships. So is there any advice for anyone who you feel has is joined or wants to join that you would add to that? And I think to summarize then also, what's one or two words that you would use to just describe the community in Global Tech Advocates and Tech London Advocates, which is quite difficult to do, but I think I can hear the themes and the trends of what you're saying in all the last answers that you've given. So,
Yeah.
wonder what your thoughts are on those two things. So, advice and then one or two words.
Yeah, I would say there are, over 40 different groups, working groups, different countries represented, Ireland, the UK, obviously, Canada, Thailand, the Bay Area, different parts of the United States.
Everything behind me, yep.
Yeah, and Singapore, exactly. I mean, just
Yeah.
look at the back there, even Philippines, and now we're entering the different incredible countries of the African continent. I think if you come from any of these countries and have always had an interest in finding people from those backgrounds, so there is an identity match here. If you've always aspired to trade with that country, let's say you're based in the UK or in fact based in another country and wanted to trade with the UK, and you want to do this in a personal way, then these incredible communities are your first place to go to. And they're free, right? They're free. And they are free also of bureaucratic involvement or interference. because they're not government-led bodies. And whilst they're incredible, there are some downsides of those bodies that we don't have at Global Tech Advocates. So what are you waiting for? I mean, go join one of these communities. You've got to be from one of these nations or a hybrid from multiple nations, or at least have the curiosity and the drive to want to trade with the nation. Maybe you want to do some business in Mexico. Maybe you've always thought about doing something in Japan, but quite unsure as to what's the easiest way of doing it, or how does one set up a business there without setting up a company. If you've ever wanted to do anything in India, India is many countries in one country. It's very complex. So, why wouldn't you come to Tech India Advocates, where we have relationships with government bodies, the High Commission, trade bodies like FICCI and CII? They're all friends of ours. We can accelerate and bypass a lot of the complexity and friction that comes from figuring this stuff out. And it's trusted. That's the most important thing, and no ulterior motive. I would close off by saying, this is a community where you've got to feel like you are ready to give, to receive. You got to give, and then you will absolutely receive. Not always. Sometimes you'll receive loads because there's so many people giving all the time. And I think that's the first thing. So I would say that's the big tenet. The second one is really making sure that you carve out time in your busy diary or your hectic schedule, which I know many of us have, to turn up to events, physically and or virtually. These days we have so many virtual events. Turn up to the events because you meet some really interesting people. And again, like I said, without obligation, without the need to transact straight away, you probably end up going for lunch or a coffee or a dinner with someone you like meeting. So carve out time. And the third final thing really is figure out what really bothers you in terms of trying to fix something in the world of technology, something that you have been disturbed by, something that you feel you really want to address, haven't had the means or the community or the pedestal, or this concept of standing on the shoulders of giants. And GTA is a giant, so you can stand on our shoulders in any of these working groups and go peek into the nation and quickly figure out. And I like Commander Data from Star Trek, if you ever watched it, quickly absorb all the knowledge and figure out what's going on in Bangalore, what's going on in Bogota, what's going on in Lahore in Pakistan, for example, any part of the world. So yeah, that's the cool thing about it. And I think the force of GTA is a strong one, especially in an age of AI where we're losing human contact.
Definitely. So I'll probably have to ask you the last question again then, which is, what could you sum it up in 1 or 2 words? What would that be for you when you're thinking of GTA and TLA?
Yeah, I think 1 or 2 words would be camaraderie, community, and I would use another C, which is collectivism.
Yeah.
And it's not all the same thing, because I think communities are great, but they're not always engaged. They're there. They may not be working together or anything particularly. It could be a lunch or something from time to time. This is an engaged community where collectives are created. So, and they champion different initiatives. Someone's doing policy. Someone's trying to help someone with something related to immigration. Someone else is trying to pioneer semiconductors. Gosh, there's so much going on. So it is I'd say it's a myriad of activities and initiatives. So figure out what's important to you. I think that's really key. Otherwise, you can get lost in this big, huge world of global tech advocates.
Definitely. So thank you so much, Af. That's really helpful, and I really appreciate your time today. Hopefully, everyone's got something out of it. You definitely shared a really good story. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tracy.